Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Maybe it's fear that propels us to ask such questions. A newborn baby, born blind, growing up with no way to make a living. As a grown man, being blind meant being a beggar. A life of begging from the misfortune of being born blind. It's hard to abide by this, being a random occurrence. Surely there must be some reason. Somebody, somewhere along the line, did something wrong, and this is the consequence. If we could just figure out what it was, we could avoid making the same mistake. We could avoid a similar fate. Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus quickly dispenses with the question and deals a blow to his disciples' own blindness. No one. Jesus goes on to explain he was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Blinded, though, by this same fear, we too, if we're not careful, get stuck in the trap. It's hard to abide by this being a random occurrence. Surely there must be some reason. If somebody somewhere along the line didn't do something wrong, then it must be God's plan. This doesn't quite cut it, though. To think that God made the child suffer so that his greatness could be on display. This kind of thinking is part of our blindness, too. Earlier this week, I was called by Pastor Bob Webb of the Rose Hill United Methodist Church to go with him to the hospital to baptize a newborn baby who was not expected to live. Holding this hours-old baby in the midst of a grieving family, it was tragic. Hard to explain. The temptation is to think of some reason that makes sense of it all, but there is no satisfactory way to make sense of senselessness. Sometimes bad things happen, and there is nothing you or I can do about it. Was this part of God's plan? I don't think so. I don't think God plans for us to suffer. Jesus' disciples are trying to make sense of senselessness. Understandably so. They were trying to understand the suffering of a man who had little to do with his condition. Surely we cannot blame the newborn for the blindness which he is suffering. What is the answer? Somehow the answer is the incarnation. In the opening verses to this gospel, John tells us that when we see Jesus, we see none other than the Word of God by whom all things were made, who came into being. And what has come into being in him, writes John, was life, and the life was the light of all people. So Jesus spat on the ground and made mud. And just as God formed Adam out of the dust of the ground, so Jesus fashioned new eyes from the stuff of creation for the man born blind. Jesus, the Word of God made flesh, incarnate and dwelling among us, is making something new out of the very earth that came into being through him. Notice no one asked Jesus to heal the man. He did so of his own initiative. In Jesus, God was overriding the brokenness and disaster that befell the man from his birth and was making him new, transformed, from living in darkness, made new to see in light. And the transformation was not just in his physical sight, it was in his whole self. Over the course of the story, John reveals to us a gradual transformation in this man's relationship with Jesus. First, he refers to Jesus simply as the one they call Jesus. He then declares him a prophet. By his actions and steadfastness, the authorities accuse him of being his disciple. He sees and declares that Jesus is from God. And he finally comes to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and worships him. Despite being unrecognized by his neighbors, abandoned by his parents, and repeatedly questioned by those in power, he never wavers in his faithfulness. As a result, he is driven out of the synagogue. This is a big deal. Being driven out or excommunicated is being separated from the center of community life. Transformation is not easy, and it is often costly. We tend to resist it even when we want it. Those who are closest to us may resist it too and try to stop it. Being transformed means disrupting the status quo, and our own experience tells us that this is difficult. Yet Jesus says to his disciples, "We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Jesus was not speaking of just what he must do, but also of his disciples' share in the work of the Father who sent him. And this is not something which is just a good idea. It's something they must do. It is work that must be done. What is this work? Well, back in chapter 6, Jesus told us, this is the work of God, to believe in him who has sent him, in him whom he has sent. The work of God is to believe in him whom God has sent. So Pastor Bob and I gathered with the family of this newborn baby. And just as the man who was born blind faithfully went to the pool to wash, I put on a white stole and I baptized this infant who was only hours old, who would be dead by lunch. The parents knew their baby would not survive months before he was born. They knew that he would not survive outside of the womb, and they chose to bring their baby into the world to get to know him as much as they could. As he was passed from loving arms to loving arms, among aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, he was loved. By our actions that day, we in faith declared that this death would not be the end of the story. Why is anyone born blind? Or why does a newborn baby live just a few hours? I do not know. Earlier I said the answer was the incarnation, but this is not an answer at all. It is a story. God in Jesus came to dwell among us and is making things new. He overrides the brokenness and the darkness and the chaos of Good Friday, and he reveals his truth in Easter. He overrides the brokenness, the darkness, and the chaos of our lives. This is a story to be told. The story as it happened in history at Calvary, and the story as it happens in our lives day to day. This is the work that we have to do. This is the work that we must do. So pray. Give to all who beg from you. Welcome the stranger. Love those that hate you. This is the story that we tell week after week as we gather here to receive communion at this table. There is more to life than what we experience in the Lent of our lives. There is Easter, and with that, there is everlasting life. Amen.